Well, one story dominating the papers, but slightly different angles as well. Let me just welcome Jason Reid from Young Voices UK to the programme. Jason, how are you?
Morning, Peter. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Very well, thanks. There's plenty to look through. Let me just go through the front pages, starting with the Daily Telegraph. British public to be asked to take in refugees. Tens of thousands of Ukrainians without family links will be allowed to stay for a year. This is interesting, Jason, isn't it? Because, I'll go through the other front pages in a second, but this is quite, this policy that the Home Office has had has been all over the place, and now people are being asked, for Ukrainians who don't have family links, and of course there are many of them, but there's something like 2.2 million Ukrainians at the moment who are fleeing the country, could be up to 4 million.
It is. The Home Office has had a lot of criticism about its refugee policy, with people perceiving it to be too harsh. Lots of other countries have removed the need to apply for a visa altogether. The UK is one of the few countries in Europe that's maintaining the need for Ukrainians to apply for a visa to come to this country. So this is perhaps part of a slightly more creative solution. The Prime Minister has been talking about the need to balance security concerns with allowing refugees in, although it is hard to see perhaps how it logistically will work in the long term and be sustainable. Maybe this is where we need some kind of spare room database. We call up David Cameron from his bedroom tax days and see if they've got some
spare room
data.
subsidy. But yes, I know what you mean, Jason. Daily Mail going on that story as well. Europe's biggest refugee crisis since the war, with 4 million fleeing Ukraine. Time for Pretty to finally get her act together. The Mail also goes with Abramovich's dirty billions frozen at last. An interesting article by Jenny Murray, the former radio presenter, who says, what is the point of women in Parliament if they're too scared to say what a woman is? Which is an interesting one. Daily Express, Putin takes revenge on the West. Vengeful Vladimir Putin hit back at the West, crippling sanctions yesterday by threatening to send global food prices soaring and imposing his own export bans. We've been hearing a little bit earlier in the programme just about inflation. Have you noticed the price of food going up or anything else going up? I mean, obviously the big one is going to be the start of the new financial year when national insurance rises go in. We'll all notice that in our April pay packets, but have you noticed this in general, Jason?
Yeah, we were heading for a cost of living crisis anyway, and so possibly the worst thing that could have happened is a war breaking out between two of the biggest food exporters in the world, in Russia and Ukraine, and so supermarket shelf prices are just going to continue to climb over the next few months, exacerbated by things like the national insurance increase. It's going to be a really tight squeeze for a lot of people.
You're absolutely right, Jason. The Mirror, Abramovich cashed in on his relationship with Putin for decades, and his steel firm may have helped build tanks killing Ukrainian kids. Clearly they were blood brothers, says the Mirror, which also has a Ukrainian flag on the front page, has for the last number of days. We stand by Ukraine. It has a backdrop of a hellish scene, as it says, residents evacuating past a body in Irpin near Kiev as Russian forces close in on the capital. Yesterday we've been hearing overnight that Russian forces are just a few miles away and have made about 5 miles progress towards Kiev. The Sun, unsurprisingly, with Abramovich, Chelsea could go bust as Roman hit ban on selling players and tickets. The sort of paralysation, essentially, of Chelsea. Sponsors pull out amid fanfares. A reference there to their sponsor 3, the phone firm, suspending its £40 million a year shirts deal, as fans of Chelsea have been told of their devastation at the government crackdown. I know Matt Graham, who's on from 6:30 to 10, is going to be talking to some Chelsea fans. Blood on his hands, says the Times. Ministers say Roman Abramovich is complicit with Putin as Britain becomes the first country to sanction him. Also a story about Russia could use chemical weapons, warns the PM. It's been interesting, actually, because we've had a war of words here, Jason, haven't we, between Vladimir Putin saying that he believes Ukraine and the West are developing biological and chemical weapons, but of course that's the classic playbook of saying, oh, they're doing something when he has used them in the past and may well use them again.
Exactly, yeah. We know how Putin thinks now. We know how the playbook goes, as you say, and this is exactly what Boris Johnson said, is it seems to be it definitely is a false flag that the US or other Western governments are storing chemical weapons facilities in Ukraine, that Putin is laying the ground so that if and when he does decide to go ahead and use chemical weapons, then he has what seems to be a bit more of a justification behind him, and so he hopes that will then mitigate the effect of sanctions and convince his own people that he wasn't in the wrong and it's the West that's the aggressor. And so it's important to get ahead of the rhetoric now and say, no, we don't have chemical weapons in Ukraine and we're not planning to use them. If he does, it's very much on him.
Absolutely. Blood on their hands, says the Eye. Chelsea owner Roman Abramovich is among oligarchs complicit in Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, according to the UK government, after hitting him with sanctions. They also had interviews with Michael Bublé, Mickey Bubbles himself, easygoing, no, I'm dramatic, he says. And Samuel L. Jackson is worried about Alzheimer's because it runs in his family. The Guardian has a dispatch from, I think this is from Mariupol, horrendous scenes there, and a very dramatic picture on the front page as well. Medieval conditions in a city under constant attack, says The Guardian. Also on its front page it has the story again on Abramovich. UK freezes assets of Chelsea FC owner over Putin links. The Daily Star, I've checked the bank balance and we can either fill the car with petrol or buy Chelsea, says a man talking to his wife at the bus stop. Roman hit by sanctions, fuel prices rise and rise, world is up. A certain type of creek which has 4 stars, absolutely no idea what word that would be, Jason, certainly not a word we're going to say on air anyway. So there we are. Metro, Russia's guilty of genocide, hospital atrocity fury. This is further reaction to the maternity hospital in Mariupol, which has been those scenes really from sort of Wednesday, Thursday and today. Blood on his hands, and a picture that a few papers use of Vladimir Putin shaking hands and shaking hands, pointing to a document on a table with Roman Abramovich, a picture taken about 17 years ago of the two men who are friends, both looking a bit younger. Abramovich's assets are frozen as 7 Putin pals worth £15 billion pay the price. Chaos as Chelsea FC is too hit with wide-ranging sanctions. And the Financial Times, same story, half of Ukraine's economy shut down as Mariupol counts war's human cost. Mass graves fill in besieged city. Terrible tales there of them just not having enough time or manpower to bury the bodies and having to put them into mass graves, not single graves, which is just horrendous. Food shortages mount and talks yield no ceasefire. Losses estimated at $100 billion. And also in the Financial Times, Abramovich and Deripaska hit as UK intensifies crackdown against oligarchs. You're not a Chelsea fan, are you, Jason?
I'm not. I think it's a bad time to be a Chelsea fan, isn't it? Some of the restrictions that have come in are very, very harsh indeed. They're not allowed to make any money effectively. They can't sell merchandise, they can't sell new tickets. There's an exemption for football-related activities, which means they can still play matches effectively, and existing season ticket holders can attend. But apart from that, Chelsea Football Club is pretty much frozen. Yeah,
and it's interesting because obviously it's such a huge business, but at the same time the flow of money is so essential to that, as it is with any business, so there are worries it could collapse.
Exactly, yeah. Roman Abramovich was obviously sensing the mood and trying to sell before this round of sanctions hit, and he wasn't able to do that. He wanted to sell it for, I think it was £4 billion. I think most people say it's worth in the region of £2 or £2.5 billion, but it looks likely now that he won't get his hands on
I certainly will not be paying £4 billion for it. All very depressing. Let's talk about an uplifting story, which I've seen. The uplifting story of the day, which is on page 27 of The Sun. Tequila-loving Gran turns 102. A tequila-slamming, pizza-loving great Gran has celebrated turning 102, and party-loving Lily Bullen marked her big day by downing a shot. Lily says the secret to her longevity is to enjoy life. She said, live one day at a time because tomorrow is never promised. As well as tequila shots, Lily loves to down Jaeger bombs and eats Domino's pizza, Greg's sausage rolls and cream cakes. She lives in a care home in Bromsgrove in Worcester and has 3 grown-up children. And her favourite pastime, her granddaughter says, is when she can watch her great-grandchildren play. So a very happy birthday to Lily. Do you hope to live to 102, Jason?
Well, just having heard that story, I think it's time to start planning my 102nd birthday. I thought you were talking about me for a second.
I mean, the diet is very similar to mine, I must say, although I don't drink alcohol. But if that makes her happy, well, there we go.
Absolutely, especially in these trying times. A bit of a Greg's sausage roll and a few tequila shots doesn't go amiss.
Cannot argue with the Greg's sausage roll. My goodness, it is something that is one of the sort of I suppose, it reminds me of when Elizabeth Hurley, the actress, was once asked, name a cheap thrill, to which she replied, Pizza Express, which was very good indeed. We're going to take a deeper dive into the papers with Jason very, very soon here on Talk Radio, so do stay with us. This is Early Breakfast. I'm Peter Cardwell in for James Max. An absolute pleasure to have your company. Mike Graham is coming up at 6:30. He's filling in for Jeremy Kyle, and Mike will be here between 6:30 and 10. We'll talk to him in just a few minutes, but delighted that Jason Reid, who's head of Young Voices UK, UK is still with me. And Jason, you've been taking a bit of a deep dive into the papers today. The Telegraph front page talking about Russian state television broadcasting criticism of the war. How on earth has this managed to get through the censors?
It's incredible, isn't it? Vladimir Putin probably thought that he had all the bases covered, having, with his intense censorship regime, effectively shut down most dissenting or liberal media outlets in the country, the BBC having to resort to shortwave radio in order to get their content into Russia. But now it turns out that the channels that are usually loyal to him, a few of the regular pundits, the regular experts, have been voicing dissent. Some of them have been saying that they've been worried that the invasion of Ukraine is a repeat of what happened in Afghanistan, which was an embarrassment for the Soviet Union. They're worried that it's damaging Russia's reputation. They're worried about this pariah status being created around Russia. And some of the hosts on these shows apparently quite alarmed by the fact that their expert guests are now saying this.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, one of the quotes that the Daily Telegraph has, if this picture starts to transform into an absolute humanitarian disaster, even our close allies like China and India will be forced to distance themselves from us. This public opinion with which they're saturating the entire world can play out badly for us. So what happened? Were they taken off the air, or what happened?
Well, it seems like the host interrupted them and quickly put an end to that conversation, moved on to another segment. This is really the heart of Russia's propaganda machine.
Pressure of time is always difficult in broadcasting.
It is, I know. We understand that problem. But the channel called Russia One, this should be the centre of loyalty to Putin, but he can't even count on them now.
My goodness, that is astonishing. To The Guardian, Western leaders reject fast-track membership for Ukraine. Emmanuel Macron has led Western European leaders in rebuffing appeals from President Zelensky of Ukraine, for fast-track EU membership, despite backing the Eastern member states. What do you make of this?
Well, it's one possible interpretation of this story is that European bureaucracy is so crippling that even when we have a war and we're desperate to help Ukraine any way we can, we still can't fast-track the process. It still takes 2 decades to allow someone to join the EU. Perhaps a more generous interpretation is that we need to be strategic about the ways that we help Ukraine. There are various things that have to be taken into account when a country joins the EU. Macron and other leaders of Spain and Germany and the Netherlands and so on are concerned about political institutions in Ukraine, high levels of corruption and things like that do have to be taken into account. Of course, Ukraine naturally wants to be part of every Western bloc that it possibly can, from NATO to the EU.
Hardly surprising, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But we have to be strategic and think about which parts of the West it makes most sense to strategically align with Ukraine. Of course, we're sending huge amounts of military aid and humanitarian aid anyway, whether they're a member of the EU on paper or not.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fascinating debate as well, and interesting that there is some resistance from Macron there. To the Daily Mail, now COVID is less deadly than the flu. COVID is now proving less deadly than the flu, although cases are rising again after restrictions ended, figures show. Experts credit high levels of coronavirus immunity, the Daily Mail says, and the reduced severity of the Omicron variant for the reduction in risk. So that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you still hear, obviously, of people getting getting COVID. Of course, my dad tested positive 12 days in a row, believe it or not, but thankfully only had to be in bed for about half a day. And apparently it's sweeping through Westminster at the moment. A lot of MPs are getting COVID. So it hasn't got, as Jerry Adams once famously said of the IRA, it hasn't gone away,
Well, this is what living with COVID looks like, is that we're going to have these waves. There will be more
acceptable level of risk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's elsewhere in the Daily Mail that they talk about the so-called Delta-Cron variant, supposedly a cross between Omicron and Delta, which is even milder than Omicron was. But it seems that the data is showing now that Omicron was something of a gift from heaven when you have a milder strain that can rip through the population at quite a pace because it's very infectious, but it has a much lower death toll than the variants that went before. And so now we see, as the headline says, it's less deadly than flu. And so this is what living with COVID looks like. We can continue going on with our lives. We don't need mandatory isolation. We don't need mask mandates or anything like that. We can just continue living our normal lives in the normal way with COVID rumbling away in the background.
Well, it'll just be one of those things, won't it? People will you'll just come into work and someone say, oh, that person's off with COVID, and it's just not such a big deal anymore.
Exactly. It's just a virus that circulates in the population. People are off work because they have a cold or they have a migraine, or they have COVID.
Yeah, indeed. A story that affects both of us hugely. On the page 9 of the Times, the price of pasta and potatoes may increase by up to 50%. Julie Hartley-Brewer's husband always keeps me going about my love of beige food, and I am a big fan of pasta and potatoes. Obviously, son of Northern Ireland farming stock, so potatoes are very important to me. But they're up by 50%.
They are. I'm son of Italian immigrants. Very much the same problem with big bowls of pasta. The price is going to go up to feed yourself. But this is a really serious issue. Food insecurity is something we don't talk about enough in this country. It affects a huge number of people. It's affecting more people, or will affect more people this year than it ever has before, because of the cost of living crisis and because of the problems with the price of food going up so much as a result of Ukraine and Russia, two of the biggest food exporters in the world, obviously being at war and not being able to export food in the way that they normally do. So prices on the supermarket shelves will continue to climb, and we need to have that in mind and keep struggling families in mind when we're formulating policy, so that people who are on the breadline, so to speak, don't have too much trouble putting food on the table.
Yes, on the pasta line and the potato line as well. By the look of things, let's hope the staple foods start falling at some stage, but doesn't look as if that's going to happen anytime soon. Now, to John Bercow, who is a despicable human being and has been indeed proven to be so by all those bullying allegations being upheld by the Standards Committee. Now he has the former Speaker, John Bercow, has a defender in none other than washed-up MP Lembit Opik, who says the ex-Speaker should go on I'm a Celebrity to rebuild his tarnished image.
Yeah, this is an interesting take on the John Bercow scandal. Lembit Opik, of course, himself went on I'm a Celebrity a few years ago, and it seems that he had a good time. He'd recommend it to his friends, but suggesting that John Bercow can rehabilitate his reputation, or even suggesting publicly that he should be trying to rehabilitate his reputation.
John Bercow doesn't, from the interviews he gave the other day, doesn't appear to think he's done anything wrong. It's
incredible, isn't it? When he was confronted with the fact that he's been banned from Parliament for life, his response was, well, I can still go in with the help of a friendly pass holder, which, I mean, anyone can go in with the help of a friendly pass holder, but
and anybody can turn up to Parliament as well. People always find this astonishing when I say, you can't just walk in and sit in the gallery and watch proceedings if you want to.
Exactly. Yeah, he's clutching at straws. The inquiry found that he was a serial liar and a serial bully. Going on I'm a Celebrity will not cleanse his image in the eyes of the public.
Yes, indeed. I'm sure there are many people who were working in his office saying, I'm a reasonable human being, get me out of here, because we're dealing with such a horrendous human being who is a bully, who is an awful person. You know the old joke that David Cameron apparently took his parking space on one occasion, and John Bercow said, I'm not happy, and David Cameron said, well, which one are you then? I mean, it is sort of classic small man syndrome. I mean, there are many small men who are great people, but there are also some of them who are just awful, like John Bercow. But we knew this, and there were so many people, like many Labour MPs, who actually excused a lot of his behaviour, and here we are with Lembit Opik doing the same thing.
Exactly. It was politically convenient, wasn't it? Because he kept making decisions that came down on the side of the Remain debate.
Excused a lot of things, yeah.
Yeah, lots of people who have a lot to answer for with defending John Bercow when he was in the Speaker's chair, when these allegations came out, of course, quite a long time ago, and they were pushed to the side, and he was excused.
And Labour didn't suspend him either.
They didn't, no, and it took a while for them to suspend his membership, even after this latest condemnation of his behaviour. At first they wanted to just do an administrative suspension pending their own investigation, but of course the pressure built and he had to be pushed out, and quite rightly so.
Absolutely. Jason Reid, head of Young Voices UK, thank you so much for coming and doing the paper review this morning. Great to see you as always. I'm delighted